Hello. So I'm David Abura. I'm a director of Cordia East Africa, and I'm also chairing IPBES, the Intergovernmental Panel on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, and in the Earth Commission. I'm presenting what I've learned from these organizations in terms of a systems model of sustainability in relation to nature and capital together as inputs for further discussions. I'm going to go through some concepts quite quickly here because hopefully this is just a quick teaser for further discussion. Now, the sustainable development paradigm developed from the 1970s or 80s onwards and really developed up until around 2015 or so around three main principles. So nature, economy, and society as the three pillars or the triple bottom line. And then a second concept around the gradient from weak to strong sustainability, depending on the degree of substitutability between these capitals or pillars that was assumed. At this point in time, this is when the Sustainable Development Goals were developed and based on this concept of strong sustainability. Now, the third main foundation for sustainable development was, of course, the dependence on nature and supply of ecosystem services to economy and society. And around 2015, this is when also IPBES's conceptual framework was developed and published as a foundation for all of the assessments that IPBES has been doing over the years. This is a simplified version of the conceptual framework and was really consolidated in the global assessment in 2019. Now, from this point, there's been a bit of a departure of threads of work. So within IPBES, based on its conceptual framework, and then in the sustainable development world, there's been a strong focus on the sustainable development goals themselves, as opposed to the model or the paradigm itself going through further development. So in exploring next steps, I came back to the original framing of sustainable development as a systems model, which Nella Meadows and others, of course, established. And the key point about a system is that the system has nodes, linkages, and purpose. In this case, we have the 3 domains or 17 goals, depending on the level you're looking at. It could be the nodes, their interactions between them, or the linkages, and the purpose is sustainable development. Now, to take this further, I just want to be explicit about the translation from IPBES's conceptual framework, shown here, to the sustainable development paradigm in nature, economy, and society together. Because the conceptual framework, while it's excellent for organizing assessments and scientific knowledge, it is very hard to communicate with policymakers, the public, and decision makers. So nature is very straightforward, of course, as are nature's contributions to people, which come out from the nature box, and direct drivers, which flow into nature. But it's these 3 boxes in the middle that are a bit harder to disaggregate into economy and society, but nevertheless possible. And so societal benefits really flow from economy to society, and these may be shared well or poorly, depending on the context. And then based on societal values, governance and other factors, indirect drivers are imposed from society to economy, which then control the direct drivers on nature. So in IPBES's global assessment, this systems model was elaborated, certainly from the bottom half of this image, quite quantitatively. On the one hand, the direct uses or nature's contributions to people, in which these are disaggregated into 18 classes, shown on the left. And the global assessment assessed the 50-year trends, whether declining or increasing. The direct drivers were also assessed quantitatively. 5 direct drivers were identified, and their impacts on biodiversity. Now, I'll just illustrate a particular narrative, perhaps the dominant one that we're looking at now, based on this model to show its utility. So let's have a look at these 3 NCP or contributions that are increasing, so energy, food and feed, and materials and assistance. And of course, these are the NCP that we commoditize and trade and sell in our economies and monetize them. And because of this maximization, the uses, the way we extract these NCP lead to the direct drivers of land and sea use change, direct exploitation, climate change, pollution, invasive alien species. And so, there's no mystique about why these 3 NCPs are increasing and all the others are declining. It's because of the way our economy works and the maximization that we apply in this economic and financial model that we have. Now, climate change is, of course, growing in importance and as a direct driver, but then also, as we should, we're looking at nature-based solutions, or how the NCP related to regulation of climate, erosion acidification, can be used to help as a climate solution. But the danger that we're seeing very clearly around the world is that if these are just maximized and monetized the same way as we have approached the prior three NCP, we'll just expand the direct drivers, and there'll be multiplier effects driving the system farther into crisis. So it's really important that we look well at the systems model to understand how to balance across it rather than maximize or silo individual components of it. So it's useful in a systems model to think of each node containing capital or assets that generate its functions. The linkages represent flows, material or immaterial flows between the nodes, and the system purpose is, of course, sustainable development for the whole system to persist and grow, as opposed to some elements of the system declining and eventually toppling the whole framework. The operational model on the right there is the Sustainable Development Goals. And various of these goals can be put into the nature, economy, and society buckets, and their interlinkages, of course, are very tangible, especially when you look at local levels. In the center there, you can look at the interactions between them. So finally, this entails a change in values, of course. So what do people value and in what ways? So coming to the IPBES values assessment in 2022 and looking at this sustainable development model, the values assessment deepened our understanding of intrinsic, instrumental, and relational values of nature, and it's clear how they pass amongst these three domains of sustainable development. And instrumental values are principally measured by finance, and maximizing that has, of course, been a big part of the challenge. The assessment developed this integrative illustration of worldviews and knowledge systems at the outermost, and which contain sets of broad values, then within these specific values and value indicators, and then cutting across these four life frames of nature, living from, in, with, or as nature, which relate to the values of nature. And given that this was developed with IPBES's conceptual framework in mind, looking at the sustainable development model as well, it's clear that this really relates to the broad values, contained within the outer circle of worldviews and knowledge systems, which is very important for this discussion, because it means if we frame solutions or questions or issues around the sustainable development framework, we can address them coherently across different worldviews across the world, and also addressing different value perspectives that are intrinsic, instrumental, and relational at the same time. So we can have compatible and consistent actions across space in different places. So what I hope this brings up for discussion, so three things. So cultures and societies hold many different worldviews and knowledge systems, characterized by varied intrinsic, instrumental, and relational values, and we can develop solutions that can address that variety. We need to make finance do its job, supporting transactions and value flows, as opposed to being a final repository. And within a coherent systems model, the tools and instruments that we're trialing around the world right now, be they bonds, biodiversity and other credits, blended instruments, these need to be supported by the system, not undermined by the system, which is currently the case. I look forward to discussing this in various fora. So thank you.